the next analysis of the consumption function, the Keynesian cross, or the last part of the Keynesian economics involves the government. It's important to keep in mind that when you had C and then you had C+I, this was the private sector. And the private sector does not always reach equilibrium at full employment. It will automatically get to equilibrium, but the idea was that it should reach equilibrium at full employment. So now we are still going to be looking at leakages, and that's money that is taken out, to be equal to injections, money being put in, but the savings need not be equal to investment, nor do taxes, which is a leakage, be equal to the government spending, which is going to be your government here. So what we're looking for right now is C plus I plus G to be equal to your income or your GDP. And what you will see is that leakages, money taken out in the form of savings plus taxes, will be equal to investment, which is the injection, plus government spending, which is another injection. This is particularly important in a time where you have a recession. What happens during a recession? Are savings equal to investments? And the answer is no, because you are pessimistic about the future. As a result, instead of spending, you are going to be saving, so savings would be going up in a recession, while investments would be going down. Now, in order to be able to get to full employment, government steps in and will offset the increase in savings by maybe lowering taxes so that the two sides are going to be equal. And then, although because investments are going down, your government spending will be going up. Of course, if you start taxing less and spending more, we are going to be faced with a possibility of a deficit, at least at the beginning. There are different theories to look at the future of tax cuts and how they're going to impact GDP and therefore tax revenue. But that's another story. I mean, that's another lecture. So, how are we going to show this picture? We will move your consumption plus investment up by the amount of government spending. So, if you have a $1,000 GDP equilibrium for the private sector C plus I alone, that's not good enough, because what you want to do is to get to full employment. And since we can't reach that with only the private sector, we're going to be asking for the government's help, which we call fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is government spending and taxation to lead the economy to full employment equilibrium. So now again, you could use the concept of the multiplier and whatever you have learned in previous lectures and chapters. You should be able to calculate here the size of the multiplier. Well, let's see. We know that the multiplier would compare the two levels of GDP. The difference here is of 500. So we would like the GDP to go up by 500. But does this mean that we need to put into the economy 500 more or less? Well, the answer is, of course, less because of the multiplier. So how much do we need to put in order to get this kind of $500 increase in GDP? Well, one thing that you can fill in on that model here is that this number will have to be equal to the 1,500. Why? It crosses the 45-degree line. So this crosses right here. So this is 1,500. This is also 1,500. So now if we know that consumption plus investment was 1,400 when the GDP level was 1,500, we know that this distance right here is of 100. So you only needed to put $100 into the economy so as to get an increase in income of 500 because of the multiplier. So again, what is it that we're looking for? We are trying to get the help of the government in order to be able to reach this particular level of GDP. There are two situations where you are not at equilibrium and the government is going to try and correct. So here, for instance, we're looking at a full employment of 1,000 and a GDP, an actual GDP equilibrium of 1,200. What does this imply? Well, it means that we have enough money to buy $1,200 worth of goods and services, but how much has been produced? The answer is only 1,000, because that's the maximum that we can produce given that this is our full employment. So, can we remain there? Well, no, because we don't have enough goods to buy using the $1,200 that we have as income. What is going to happen is that if the government does not intervene, you will see that the prices are going to be bid up because there is too much money, 1,200, in relationship to the amount of goods that are available. And as prices go up, you have inflation. And what happens to the C+I+G curve? Well, if there is an increase in price, then your C plus I plus G is going to be moving down to get to equilibrium at full employment. So sometimes it is going to be done automatically through the market system, and sometimes it would be the government that would correct for that change. So again, if it was the market system alone, then it would be the prices going up, which would lead to a decrease in spending overall. But how could the government correct for this kind of excessive amount of money? And by the way, this gap right here at full employment is what we will call inflationary gap. So you will be in an inflationary situation if you have more money than goods available. So what would the government do here? Well, they can either work on the government spending or work on taxes. Actually, generally speaking, they would be working on both. If you have an inflationary gap, what would happen to spending? Should it go up or down? And would taxes go up or down? And the answer is taxes should be going up so that spending goes back to equilibrium at full employment. We could also have a slightly different situation, like right here, where you are at full employment, you would have been at full employment at 1,400, but you are at equilibrium only at 1,000. This is a little bit like the situation of a recession. During the Great Depression, we were at equilibrium, but short of full employment. So how are we going to call this kind of a gap? And the gap is going to be measured at full employment, the amount that the C plus I plus G curve should shift. This is going to be a recessionary gap. So how will the government deal with this? What will they do to government spending? What will they do to taxes? Well, if you have a recession, should taxes go up or down? You want people to be spending more, so taxes are going to be going down while government spending is going to be going up. More welfare, more government spending on roads, on the social programs, and so on and so forth. Could the recessionary gap be eliminated by itself without the help of the government? And the answer is yes, it could, but it would take much longer. The way it would work is that if you have high unemployment because you are so much below full employment, then prices are going to be falling, and as prices fall, more employers will be willing to hire people at lower wages, and people are going to be willing to work for lower wages since prices have fallen, and now with the same income they are able to buy more goods and services. So it could happen, and as they spend more, then the whole line moves up to your full employment of 1,400. Now let's be a little bit technical here. Can you figure out how much government would have to spend in order to get to 1,400? Keep in mind that your marginal propensity to consume is 0.5. You would like GDP to grow by 400. Would they have to inject into the economy 400, more or less? Well, since you have an MPC of 0.5, then that will give you a multiplier of 2, and if you want to increase GDP by 400, all you need to do is inject into the economy half that much. Since given a multiplier of 2, there will be twice as many incomes created, and GDP will be going up by that amount. Now, how about the situation right here? Can you figure out how much government should cut spending in order to get from 1,200 to 1,000? Your marginal propensity to consume is 3/4. So how large is the multiplier? It will have to be equal to 4. And if you want an increase, actually a decrease in GDP of 200, your spending will have to go down only by 50, because 50 times 4 will give you the difference of 200. So although this sounds like a complicated concept, it hopefully makes much more sense, and you're able to fit all those pieces together, the pieces of the puzzle of the Keynesian economics or the Keynesian cross. Thanks.